Hello, this is Sunday Runday, except it's actually Monday. I got back late from a trip yesterday and unfortunately did not have the time or energy, mostly energy, to record this. So I apologize. But I do feel excited about today's podcast because I actually did glean some insights from yesterday that I would like to incorporate into today, and I'm hoping it'll make it better. Unfortunately, I also had to re-record this because I spent about a half hour talking to record this before, and for some reason, the recording software crapped out near the end, and I have the file. It's 400 something megabytes, but it doesn't play. So we're gonna try again. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it works this time. So the main topic for today is kind of the opposite of what I usually rant about. And what I usually rant about is trail culture. And at least in my area of Los Gatos, California, there are a variety of trails and pathways that is shared by walkers, runners, bikers, sometimes even people who scooter, skateboard, and various other devices. And I've lived in Los Gatos for most of my life. So I know how people, one, are supposed to conduct themselves on these trails, and two, how they actually do. And for a long time, I didn't think about this concept of trail culture because it was fine. Most people were nice, they were polite enough, anyways, that I wasn't bothered by it. Starting from, I would say, about 1995, and mostly around 2000, which is when I started really getting on these trails, biking on them. Um, I got to see the evolution of how people were. So even starting from like languages, right? When I was a kid, more people spoke French on the trails. I no longer ever hear French spoken by people on the trails. Then later on, there was more Spanish speaking people, then Chinese speaking people, um, and then various Indian languages, Hindi, I'm going to assume, but I'm not really sure. And then recently, and more a larger influx of Russian speaking peoples. So that's over the course of roughly like 20, 25 years. But the main thing I wanted to talk about was simply how people navigate in terms of traffic. Now, the trails around here, and I assume based on my experience of most trails elsewhere, the rules are really simple. Okay, you stay on the right and you pass on the left. So the trail works one lane going each way, right? Um, so you stay on your right side, right? And if you want to pass someone who's slower than you, right, you go to the left side, give them enough room, you pass them, get back to the right. And now before you do that, before you pass, you got to make sure it's clear, right? You don't want, if there's a whole bunch of people coming from the opposite way, right? That's their right of way to go on what's, from your perspective, your left side. From their perspective, it's their right side, right? That's their natural way of going. So if you want to pass, right, you can't just go when there's a bunch of people. You'll crash into them. It's not their obligation to move out of the way. It's yours to make sure it's clear. And this never used to be much of an issue. I would say like people cause issues with this, like, I don't know, 0 to 10% of the time, let's say, for most of my time being on the trails. But over the course of the last roughly 2 years, so starting in mid 2019, I started noticing more and more people were not really respecting the rules nearly as much. So bikers in particular, they were cutting too close when they were passing, which is one, just kind of rude, but two, sometimes it was actually dangerous where people were having to duck out of the way, or if, they had accidentally like would have elbowed the biker, or vice versa. Biker could have accidentally elbowed them, especially at high speeds, right? And on the one hand, most of the posted speed limit signs on the trail are for 15 miles per hour. If you're a biker, though, and you're doing it safe, honestly, I see plenty of bikers going above 15 miles per hour. I myself, like, I'm not a fast biker by any means, but if I'm really going, right, I get up to 20, 25 miles per hour and flat. No problem. And I've seen bikers go faster than that for sure. If you can do that, right, and you give enough space, give enough warning, there's absolutely no issue at all in terms of safety. But regardless of speed, I have noticed particularly bikers not giving that proper space these days and expecting other people to move out of the way, or simply not caring. I look at their facial reactions to see if they're at all worried that an accident might have happened, if they're watching out for it. And no, they just like trucking straight through, no reaction at all, just looking straight ahead. Um, I am calling out bikers mostly, but I see this problem arise with runners and walkers. Like people being on just straight up being on the left side actually. It's kind of weird. I don't really understand that at all. Like you're walking on the wrong side, you're constantly having to move over to the other side, and you see no one else really acting in the way that you do, but you still decide, hey, I'm still going to keep doing this. It's just kind of strange to me. But anyways, the point is, over the last 2 years, the simple two rules of keep right, pass left, have just been violated, and it's just really annoying because I get that I seem kind of like a traffic Nazi or something, but one, it fucks up the flow, right, of traffic. If you have some people thinking you're supposed to be on the right, some on the left, you have all these different definitions of when it's safe to pass. It gets real messy. But most importantly, it's just really uncomfortable to be out there, right? You got people getting way too close to you, way too fast. You're having to dodge around people you shouldn't have to dodge around. And you're having to think about traffic a lot more than you really need to be. Because, like I said, there's two rules. And if everyone's following these two rules at least kind of closely, you really shouldn't be having to think about this too much, right? You're just like going your way, sticking to the right, and then occasionally, you look around, cool, safe to pass, pass on the left. Not a lot of thinking involved. Anyways, that's quite a lot of ranting for what is supposed to be a positive podcast, at least for today. And the thing I want to say instead of that is actually kind of continue with the negative. But over time, people have stopped greeting other people so much. And what I mean by that is, when you're passing the other way, as a kid, I remember a lot of people saying like, "Oh, hi, good morning." They would wave, they would smile. And I don't think you shouldn't be obligated to do that at all, right? It's not your job to be making other people happy or to interact with them. When you go out, you do your thing, as long as you're following the rules and being kind of safe. But it has been just kind of a bummer over the years to see less and less of that. And especially with, the increase in people who are just straight up rude and unsafe, sometimes I forget that, there's still really, really nice, like extra nice, friendly people out there. And I've had people still wave and say hi to me. And in those times, it reminds me like, hey, it's not, if I want this to be a positive place, right? It's also an onus on me. Like it's my responsibility too, to make it what I want it to be. And so I, at some point, started, when I could remember, even if I was having a crap day, to, just say hi, to wave, to smile, and not like make it at a big, like, oh, how are you doing? Da 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 da, making a big conversation starter. But just giving people a chance to respond back or not, if they don't want to. But if they are like, surprised and happy that someone's waving at them and smiling, you know, maybe it makes their day and maybe it makes them do it more, and then therefore causing this chain reaction of positivity, right? And having started doing that more now, one, I find that I'm actually just happier. Regardless of whether these people are responding back or not, that doesn't actually matter to me too much. In terms of like, oh, that guy should have waved back at me. Like, no, but just like, hey, getting to that sort of positive mindset has just been great. And if people do, seem happy about that, that's just, extra cherry on top. It's great. I love cherries. Well, actually, I just love food in general. So cherries are the cherries of cherries. I know that doesn't make much sense. I feel like I'm just spouting words at this point. It's like semantic satiation, right? When you say one word too much, it kind of loses meaning. Anyways, back to positivity. Yeah, so that sort of thing has just been helping me get out and be out on the trails and having a better mental time of it. And so what I'm trying to say to you is not necessarily for if you're running or out and exercising, but sometimes it's useful to, when you're having a negative time, right? Or just not having a positive one necessarily, to force yourself to develop these little positive habits. And whether or not they are affecting other people, sometimes it might just make you happier. And really, that's the important thing, right? That you are taking care of yourself first, keeping positive, having a good time. And if it's spilling over to other people, that's just an added bonus. That's great. So if you remember, I just like you all to be a little more positive in terms of interactions with other people, whether they deserve it or not, right? Maybe it'll just make them better people. Okay, the other thing, and actually before I get to my other topic, a little segue is I've been thinking of trying to standardize a little bit more the lengths of each specific podcast topic. So, for example, keeping like maybe Sunday Runday to be a little shorter, Financial Friday to be a little longer. I'm not sure yet on the exact times, but it would be good to just have different specified time lengths or at least ranges so people, when they listen, they know what they're getting into, right? When you listen to a specific podcast, it's always good to know, like, hey, this is like a 5 minute podcast. That's a half-hour podcast. That's a 2 hour one. And that way, like, oh, I can use this for like breakfast, for before I go to sleep. I know how much time I have to listen to this podcast, and I can use it for that specifically. So yeah, if you guys have any thoughts on like specific times you might want, like for which ones to be longer or shorter, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just trying to test out talking about different things and seeing kind of what range they fall in, and then trying to solidify it over time into a more narrow band. And that way people can, you know what to expect. Okay, last topic, which is kind of two subtopics. I was talking with my friend Alex this weekend, and he basically was talking about these things that he thinks that people don't think enough about or can't quite put into solid, concrete ideas. And these things that are kind of making them sad when they're missing out. Sad is not necessarily the best word, but they're not necessarily fulfilled and content with their lives, and they are missing out on two things in particular. And it would serve them really well if they had this more in their lives. And this speaks more to adults because it's easier to miss out on these if you're an adult, but it applies to everyone really. Number one, this is a little bit more universal, also a little easier to address, and it's that people were kind of designed to move around, right? We are bipedal, which gives us an inherent advantage in terms of endurance. Not going to go into the science here, mostly because I don't fully understand the mechanics and I don't want to talk about something I don't understand. But for example, there is a thing called persistence hunting, whereby people will hunt animals for food by simply just outlasting them. Like, you're not going to chase down a gazelle, right, in a sprint. I know I'm definitely not. Pretty sure even someone like Usain Bolt wouldn't be able to do it. But what we can do is not get tired of moving for much, much longer periods of time. And so persistence hunting, you chase them, through walking, jogging, running, but spreading out, making sure you keep an eye on the prey so they can't escape. And you simply just chase them down over many, many hours of the day. I believe sometimes it takes 8 hours or more. And simply wait till they collapse because they're just overworking themselves. They're overexerted, run out of energy. And then once that happens, you no longer have to try to sprint it down. You can simply walk over to it and kill it for food. And so what I'm trying to say is that humans, were built to move around for a long period of time. And while I'm not telling you or, even me to like go out there and walk for 8 hours, right? That's probably not healthy and not feasible for most people. But to simply just have this routine, and it doesn't have to be specific as to what you do and for how long necessarily, but to go out every day and to move, and the effects of that are just going to be so much more than you might think, perhaps. I kind of talked about this, but like every single run I've ever done, I have never regretted. I've always come back feeling better. And, whether that's simply, working your heart rate, burning fat and carbohydrates, getting vitamin D from the sun, fresh air, maybe a combination of all these and more, right? It just makes you feel better, more content, happier, right? And I think a lot of people, especially when you work an office job, or even something like truck driving, you miss out on that, and you suffer. Your life suffers as a result. So get out there, move on a consistent basis. The activity itself doesn't need to be consistent. I don't care. The second thing, this one is a little more difficult to solve and a bit more unique to adults because children have this structure in their lives, and that is school. And the cool thing about school is you are amongst your peers in an environment where you have, a goal to work towards. Maybe multiple goals, right? To finish homework, to pass the test, to get a good grade, to do well in sports. But you're there with your peers in a productive environment where you're all striving, you're socializing with them, and oftentimes working with these people, even if they're not friends, right? At least for part of it, they're your teammates, your classmates, and you're striving together to work on a project, on a sport to win. And this is really important because people were designed, they evolved in a social construct, right? We didn't evolve and thrive, by going out on our, by ourselves. And so one of the things that sucks is when, especially after college, it's hard to find these groups where you're working together, you're being productive. It's actually really it feels great, and sometimes a lot of people don't realize that until they don't have it anymore. Um, and of course, you have things that you can do when you're an adult, but it's not provided to you, right? Like you have to find a job with coworkers you can maybe, hopefully, at least kind of like to the point that you can talk with them, communicate with them, learn from them, hopefully, provide back and teach them. It's all a very like valuable and thrilling experience sometimes, in a sense. But if you don't have work or you don't like your work, sometimes it's very difficult, right? You gotta, keep in touch with old friends, make new friends, and make time for them. So that is a more difficult problem, I think, to solve, but something to kind of keep an eye on. And for me, right, that's been a bit of a struggle, especially as I'm not working right now. But I think the last time I had that in my adult life on a very consistent basis was when I was teaching at this school called Fusion Academy, and it's in Palo Alto. I really, really loved my first set of coworkers. I still keep in touch with a lot of them. We're still good friends. But when I was working there, we were talking about like how do we best teach these kids? How do we address this behavioral issue? How do we address this special quirk and turn it into like a point of joy for them and maybe the people around them? It's very collaborative. And I would hung out with them. I would play disc golf. We'd do escape rooms. We played board games. It was just great. Now that I don't have that, it's a little tougher. I do have, a group of friends that are very tight knit, or at least in my opinion, they feel tight knit. I feel close to them. And unfortunately, I don't do things with them in person that often, especially because I'm a little farther away from them. But even that has been incredible over the last couple of years, especially through the pandemic. And so, what I would say to you, the listener, is if you're an adult and you're finding that you're not having a tight knit community, and you can define that however you want, right? In terms of like how many people or what you're doing. I'm not going to say, hey, the ideal is 20 people and you have to do physical like exercise activities. No, I mean, some people are more to themselves and like two, three people is more than enough. Other people like, no, I got to have 50 and it's got to be like, rock climbing or computer gaming or I don't know, whatever it may be. The point is find what works for you, right? And hopefully you have other people that you can draw inspiration from, right? See what works for them and why it's working for them. If you're feeling, uncontent, incontent, I think it's uncontent, dissatisfied. Anyways, this is about to hit 20 minutes, so just want to leave it around here. This is supposedly Runday Sunday. It is currently Runday Monday. Uh, get out and try to create your own positivity. Be out and be moving on a fairly consistent basis, and find your community, and community in a productive, um, effort, meaningful way. You know. Anyways, thanks for listening. I know this is a bit long, and I will see you guys hopefully soon. Bye.